Dear viewers, now I will discuss on the lesson 3 part risk. The focus is on risk, how the risk of a project is managed or controlled. So what are the conditions of uncertainty? That's the main question, right? So actually risk can be originated or sourced from inside or outside, from a known or unknown ranges. We don't know many causes. So it can be internal or external. So risks are there, uncertainties are there that we should confess. And then what should we? Risk development is indicated by the trigger condition. Risk can be positive like opportunities. It can be negative like threats. If a risk becomes an issue, you must act properly. So what is trigger condition now? It's an event or situation that indicates that a risk is about to occur. For example, you are finding that there is a huge airflow or cyclone. So you are assuming that the tsunami or flood or some kind of devastating situation is coming. Or it can be an opportunity. What is opportunity? A risk that, if developed, would create a positive effect on one or more project objectives. So, for example, for political reason, the government of the country is changing. So, it's kind of volatility or risk. But the new government can be a opportunity for you. And then threat. What is threat? This is also a risk that would have a negative effect on one or more project objectives. That's why you call it threat. And then we have issue. Issue, this is a current situational condition that may have a negative impact on the project objectives. So we call it an issue. So before deciding about uncertainty and risk, we have to understand what is trigger condition, opportunity, threat, and issue. Then you see in the slide that risk can be very low or can be very high. If it is too low, it's acceptable, but to some extent there would be a risk tolerance area. This blue and the yellow area is okay, but if it is red, that means it's high risk. There are many examples you can give for project risk. For example, working with new vendors or building a new process, or supply chain issues for correct bricks, or building code compliances are there, or there can be a conflict between the stakeholders, or the retail market changes decline in store shopping, or a site survey shows risk of slippage from coastal erosion. So there are many kinds of examples can be given which can come as an issue or risk for you. So we have to identify the business context. In predictive, business risk represents an opportunity or for gain or loss. Business risk means so you are going for a gain or a loss. So it's uncertain. So project risk management is systematically maximizes the probability of the positive events and minimizes the probability and consequence of negative events. So your goal is to increase the positive effects and decrease the negative effects, and that's called the project risk management. In the adaptive approach, actually, as project uncertainty increases, the risk of rework increases. Adaptive life cycle uses smaller increments of work to enable feedback and progressive elaboration of a scope. That's why in each iteration, you have to face these uncertainties. So the business risk is the inherent risk in a business endeavor that carries the potential for either profit or loss. Types of business risk can be competitive or legislative or monetary or operational. Competitive means it can come from the competitors. Legislative means it can come from the industry regulation or from the government side. Monetary, it can come from inflation or country perspective, fiscal policy or monetary policy. Or operational, when you are going to work, there can be any kind of uncertainties or risk can happen. So, what is risk strategy? So, one word we should keep in mind: risk appetite. The appetite is how much risk you can actually embrace or accept. The degree of uncertainty of an organization or an individual who is willing to accept it in an anticipation of a reward. Because if you take risk, you will be rewarded too. Those people can take more risk, they can get more reward too. So as a person, are you a risk seeking or risk neutral or risk averse? Risk seeking means people who are actually accepting, embracing the risk because they know that if they can take the risk, they can make profit more. And risk neutral is you are not making any kind of barrier to the risk or you are not accepting it, just you are neutral. On the other hand, risk averse is who just escape it, who just try to avoid it or try to block it. That's called risk reverse. So there is another word, risk threshold, the level of risk exposure above which risks are addressed and below which risk may be accepted. So for example, if you have budget for 1000 taka, so if you have a limit that 100 taka you can increase or decrease, that means your limit is 100 taka. The highest amount is 1100. The lowest is 900. So within this amount, you have to decide. So the 1100 is the threshold. But risk appetite is this part. That's from 1000 to 1100, you will accept it. Embrace it. That's why it's called risk appetite. So risk threshold is the level of risk exposure above which risks are addressed and below which risk may be accepted. If it is below that, you will accept it. If it's above, then you will avoid it. That's why it's called risk threshold. So we should know that which are too high or too accept, which are too low enough to just be accepted. What criteria determines in the risk register? So we have to make a risk register, and I will show you that later. And management guidelines. Use qualitative high, medium, low, high risk, medium risk, or low risk, or quantitative ratings like 1, 2, 3. You can make 1 to 10 grading rating. Or you can set a maximum risk exposure level that can be managed without escalation. So there should be a risk management plan. In the project management plan, one component is risk management plan. It means it describes how the risk management activities will be implemented, how the risk management activities will be structured, and how the risk management activities will be performed. So factors in project characteristics we should keep in mind. What is the size, complexity, importance, development approach? We should think about that. And so risk management plan actually includes many components. It includes risk strategy, the methodologies, rules and responsibilities, funding, timing, risk categories, stakeholder risk appetite, definition of risk probability and impact metrics, reporting formats, and tracking documents. All these combined together makes the risk management plan. And there are some inherent risks that you cannot avoid. For example, agile projects include risk in user stories as a part of backlog work items. Teams discuss risk at planning meeting, stand-up meeting during the normal course of work. Teams place risk in a risk register, use information radiators to ensure visibility and backlog refinement, process that includes constant risk assessment. So this figure you can see, and at the underneath of this figure you see simple, that's predictive and planning. If low risk and it's close to certainty, that means simple, close to agreement. It is far from certainty and far from agreement, that means it's chaos. So if it's simple, that's good. Even if it is complicated or complex, you see the figure. If it's complicated or complex, you can adapt it. So adaptive planning. So if it is simple, predictive, you know everything before. So it's predictive. And you have to change again and again, so it's adaptive planning, complicated or complex. But if it is too much risky, too much far from agreement, too much far from certainty, that means it's chaos, fundamentally risky. You should avoid it. And there are four cases. You can see in the figure. There's known knowns. That means you know what you know. So you know the risk and you know how to address it. This is one case. And this is known unknowns. This is one known unknowns. You know the risk, but you don't know how to address this risk. That's this one. And this one, unknown knowns. Actually, you have the capacity to address it, but you don't know what is that risk. That's why it's called unknown known. And something unforeseeable. That means you don't know what you don't know. You don't know the risk and you don't know how to address that risk. So this is unknown. So these four categories you have to find out for your project. So how to identify the risk? So risk identification techniques are there. First, you can gather data and analyze them. You can break down the risks, which we call RBS, risk breakdown structure. We can make a brainstorming analysis or nominal group techniques. We can do a SWOT analysis, strength, weakness, threat, and opportunities. And we can make affinity diagram to show the stories or assumption analysis. We can make a document review or Delphi techniques of the expert opinions. We can do a Monte Carlo simulation for larger organizations. These are the examples how we can collect the data and analyze them. So what is risk breakdown structure actually? RBS is a hierarchical representation of potential sources of risk. So risk breakdown structure. And then affinity diagram is a technique that allows large number of ideas to be classified into groups in a diagram, affinity diagram, group by group. Or Delphi techniques is a form of gathering expert opinions in which members of group are asked to poll anonymously. So this is Delphi techniques. Experts are asked to put their opinions and then polled anonymously. So we can use breakdown structure, we can use typical categories such as technical, management, commercial, external. For example, this figure, you can divide all sources of project risk into many aspects like technical risk or management risk or commercial risk. And each one you can divide again, like for the technical risk, you can divide scope definition, requirement definition, estimates, technologies, technical inferences like that. So there can be a qualitative way of analyzing risk or quantitative way of analyzing. For quantitative, you can use probability test or probability and impact matrix that is agreed for mapping the probability of occurrences of each risk and its impact on project objectives if that risk occurs. You can prioritize risk for further analysis by assessing and combining their probability of occurrences and impact in probability impact matrix. Then, if further support is required, use a quantitative assessment. You can see this figure. So all these risks can be categorized by this one. So you will show that what is the scale. It is low risk or medium or high risk or very high. So see the figure here in the slide. It can be nil, the scale, very low, low, medium, high. So name the risk and put it this scale mark, and then see the probability. Is it 70%, 80%, or 50 to 70%, or 30 to 50%, or 1%, less than 1%? And you can see the time. If this risk happens, what kind of delays will be happening? 6 months, 3 to 6 months, 1 to 3 months, or 1 week, no changes. And then see the cost, how much cost will incur if this risk comes. So it's 5 million, 50K, or 100K, or no change. So in this way, actually, you can see that if it is a significant risk or is a non-significant risk. So what is probability impact assessment? You can use a numeric values or colors. If you using numbers, multiply them to give a probability impact score. This makes evaluating relative priority easier. This is not a quantitative evaluation, just you will give some color or values. You can also make a risk register. I will show you that. So this is the color that I have told you, that you can put some colors, very low risk, very high risk. Very high means very red, then yellow, then light yellow, then very low green. So we can put this risk name in these boxes to understand which one is significantly risky and which is not. So this is the risk register. In the risk register, you can see the figure here. In the risk register, you can write the risk description. Then you can write the impact description. Then you can give a score, impact level 5, 5, 3, 2, 1, like this. Probability level of score 1, 2, 3, like that. And then you can score the risk 5, 10, 9 in this way. So you can ask also trigger condition, planned response, what will be the response, action plan, and who will be the responsible, who will act for this, who is responsible, manager or team member or whoever. So in this way, actually, you can make a risk register in which all the risks will be listed, and you will show the probability, impact, and magnitude of each risk. Then you can compare them, and then you can find the actual path or ways how to address these risks. So to understand actual risk, to avoid the quantitative risk analysis method, you can use the simulations, you can use sensitivity analysis, you can use decision tree analysis, influence diagram, and I am showing them. For example, this is a decision tree analysis. Branches represent decisions or even each with associated cost and risk. So you see the figure, it's an influence diagram. You can use that from one point to another point. If this one, then you can go this way or that way, and then come here and this way and that way, and come this one and this way, that way. So you have two options, either this way or that way. So make a tree to understand and to reach the goal, what will happen. And then expected monetary value, you have to calculate the expected monetary value. What is this? Multiply the monetary value of possible outcome with its probability of occurrence to calculate the EMB for each branch. So for example, there is a 30% of probability of a delay in the receipt of parts with a cost to the project of 9,000. That means 30% of 9,000 means 2,700 will be the EMB. So by this way, you can calculate your EMB. So this is an example of decision tree analysis. For example, if see the figure here, decision definition. So you want to build or upgrade. You need a new software, you will build it or upgrade it. So if you build it, new plan, this option. If you upgrade it, this option. And if this is the option you select, then chances note 60%, 40%. That means strong demand 60%, weak demand 40%. Then the cost amount here. So based on this cost, you can go for which path you will follow. This one or that one, this one or that one, this one or that one. This way you can calculate your risk. So we should practice some good practices for addressing the risk, for risk response. Risk responses should be appropriate for the significance of the risk. It should be cost effective, realistic within the project context, and should be efficient. With less resources, you have to address it. Agreed to be by the relevant stakeholders. Stakeholders must be agreed on this, and it should be owned by the responsible person. The person who is responsible for that, accountable for that, they should agree. And a trigger condition signals a risk can develop. So we should see the trigger condition, then we should act. And team should implement a risk response. So we should make the risk management plan and we should apply them in specific cases. So there are many ways. We should know the secondary risk, residual risk, and contingency plan and contingency reserve. For risk response, we can use them. So what are they actually? Secondary risks actually risks that arise as a direct result of implementing a risk response. So you are responding to a risk, and for that response, you are having another risk. That's called the secondary risk. And another is residual risk. So you have tried best to address a risk. Still, there will be some lapses. So this remaining residuals is called residual risk. And what is contingency plan? For addressing the certain plan, known risks, known uncertainties, you have a contingency plan. You have plan. That's called you know advance what will occur and what can be done for that, how to address that. That's called the contingency plan. And contingency reserve is money you are keeping for that addressing risk. So for the risk, you can have the threat or you can have the opportunity. If it is threat, you can escalate it, you can avoid it, you can transfer it, you can mitigate it, you can accept it. For example, if a threat comes, if you see that it's beyond your capacity, so you escalate it to the higher authority. Done. If you see that it's very risky and cannot be dealt by any means, so avoid it. If you see that it can be transferable, for example, you can buy insurance for health or other kind of insurance for any kind of risk, that's transferring risk to other third party. Or mitigating, you can try by proper planning, proper addressing, employing proper teams, you can mitigate the risk. Or you can accept it. You are feeling that if you accept it, you can be gained. So these are the ways you can actually address, you can respond to the risk. And for the opportunity, in the same manner, you have the escalation, exploit the opportunity, share the opportunity, enhance the opportunity, and accept it. So risk can be either exploiting or avoid, shared or transferred, enhanced or mitigated, accept or escalate. So this is all. With this slide, actually, I am concluding my discussion on risk. In the next video, I'll talk about the quality of a project deliverables. Thank you so much.